Members of the jury, as you realize, there has been a very summary ending of the trial in this case. The defendant comes here this morning and announces that it rests upon the plaintiff's proof, that the defendant has a right to do under our law. The defendant exercised its right in that respect. It also made a motion to dismiss, but the court recognized that there was a question of fact for you to pass upon. You have sat in these negligence cases, not alone at this term, but upon prior occasions when you have acted as jurors. You will remember that the court always charged you that the burden of proof rested upon the plaintiff to show that the defendant was exclusively responsible for the happening of the accident. In other words, that the plaintiff was guilty of no negligence and that the defendant was the party who was guilty of all the negligence which led up to the happening of the accident. The rule of law in this case is somewhat different. This is what is known as a death case. The lips of a deceased are closed. She is not here to tell you her story as to how the accident happened, and our highest court has therefore said that the burden is not upon the plaintiff, that is, the representative of the deceased party, to show that she was free from negligence, but that the burden rests upon the defendant, and the defendant must plead it and come into court and prove that the deceased was guilty of negligence, which led to the happening of the accident. When that is done, and you are satisfied that there was concurrent negligence upon the part of both parties, you would be obligated to find a verdict for the defendant in this case. But what is the situation here? The representatives of this deceased party are made the plaintiffs in this litigation. They come in here under formal pleading and they present their proof. Looking over the pleadings in this case, I find that, as required by the law, the defendant has set up here a defense, first alleging denials, and then a defense, and here is the defense. The defendant alleges upon information and belief that any injuries which may have been sustained by the plaintiff intestate herein at the time and place mentioned in the complaint were caused by her own negligence and carelessness, in that she did not take the usual necessary and proper precautions for her own safety and was otherwise negligent and careless in the premises. Now, that defense set up here is nothing more than the ordinary defense in a death case. And ordinarily the defendant comes in here and makes proof under the circumstances. But mark you now, and do not let it get into your minds, that I say that this defendant is not justified in doing as it has done in this litigation. Whether rightly or wrongly, it is not for me to say, but it has the absolute right to say that we will stand here upon the plaintiff's proof, and we will not present any proof. So therefore, gentlemen of the jury, you have here only the story submitted to you by the witnesses called on the part of the plaintiff. Who are they? All of them are tenants in that building, tenants of long duration in the occupancy of their several apartments. What have they told you? There was an elevator in that building, and the first thing that you have got to consider is as to the condition of that elevator at the time of the happening, or just prior to the happening of this accident. It is the contention of the plaintiffs in this case that that elevator door was open at the time that this deceased dropped onto the same. In view of this situation, as the evidence has now presented itself, with that door open leading into the elevator, she had a right to assume that the man who was hired for the purpose of operating that elevator was there, in there. She went in, and mark you now, there is no claim in this case that she was negligent because there is no proof to support it. There are witnesses here, members of the jury. What do they tell you? That on occasion, prior to the one in question, this elevator was in the habit of ascending or descending without anyone touching the machinery on the inside cage of the car in question. And their claim is this, that this woman went into that car and that a condition arose again on this occasion that the car started down without any notice or warning. The deceased, seeing the situation, made an effort to get off of the car, and in doing so, as the witnesses have told you, she was caught by the top of the cage of that car and her life practically crushed out. That is the proof as submitted to you in this case. You have heard counsel for the defendant move to dismiss the complaint at the end of the plaintiff's case.